It all began with a silence so deafening, it raised more questions than answers. For years, Thomas Markle kept his mouth shut. Through the royal wedding, through the global interviews, through the fallout, the fame, the endless tabloid attacks. He stayed quiet when his daughter cut him off, when the palace turned its back, and when Meghan and Harry painted their narrative on the world stage. Millions assumed it was guilt, shame, maybe even fear. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But now he's speaking. And what he's saying, no one saw coming. What would drive a father to break his silence after years of ridicule, rejection, and relentless headlines? Why now? Why this secret? And more importantly, what if the biggest secret of Meghan Markle's life isn't about her marriage, her fame, or even her children, but something she tried to bury long before she became the Duchess of Sussex? A decision allegedly made at just 19 years old. A surgery so intimate, so irreversible, that even her closest friends reportedly never knew. A hysterectomy. Think about that for a moment. How would that change the entire public image of Meghan Markle? The tales of baby fever in the palace. The carefully curated stories of fertility struggles. The births of Archie and Lilibet. The interviews hinting at miscarriages, medical trauma, IVF. Every single tear. Every narrative. Could it have all been manufactured? Let's be honest. This isn't the kind of story that fits neatly into the glossy, perfectly filtered brand Meghan and Harry have cultivated. This isn't another designer dress at a charity event, or a scripted Netflix monologue about being silenced. This is something else. Something raw. Something that, if true, could unravel everything the public thinks they know. And it all starts with one man. One broken father. One final straw. Thomas Markle. He's not perfect. Not by a long shot. He's been called a media opportunist. A bitter old man. A liar. But here's the thing. The man is still her father. And for better or worse, he claims to know the side of Meghan that no one else does. He raised her. Fed her. Funded her private education. Paid for her first headshots. Drove her to auditions when she was struggling to land a role in LA. He was there before the royal titles, before the castles, before the stylists and PR teams rewrote her history. So why is he talking now? According to Thomas, it's not out of revenge, it's out of truth. He says he can't sit quietly anymore. That he's watched his daughter rewrite her origin story, paint him as a villain, and bury a truth that could change how the world sees her entire rise to royalty. And this truth? It's not about race, or privilege, or fame. It's about pain. Real, physical, emotional pain, buried deep in the shadows of her teenage years. Pain that allegedly led to a drastic decision. A secret surgery, and a lifetime of consequences. A hysterectomy at 19. Let's pause here, because that's not a small claim. A hysterectomy, removal of the uterus, is life-altering. It means no biological children. It means early menopause, hormonal therapy, identity shifts, medical trauma. And if it really happened at 19, that raises massive questions. What happened to Meghan as a teenager? Why would a young woman make that decision so early? Was there a medical emergency? A traumatic diagnosis? A desperate choice? And if it did happen, why keep it secret for so long? More importantly, if it's true, how do you explain the births of Archie and Lilibet? Because that's the rabbit hole Thomas Markle is opening. And make no mistake, he knows exactly how deep it goes. According to leaked emails, recorded voice notes, and even unpublished interview transcripts, Thomas has been collecting pieces of this puzzle for over a decade. He says he kept quiet to protect Meghan, that he never wanted this to go public. But something changed. A final betrayal. A moment that broke whatever fragile hope he still had of reconciliation. Sources close to the family say Thomas has felt increasingly cornered. Isolated in Mexico, dealing with health scares, watching his name get dragged across tabloids while Meghan continues her PR glow-up tour across Hollywood and royal headlines. And when Meghan allegedly refused to let him see his grandchildren, not even once, something snapped. Now he's talking, and not just in whispers. He's bringing receipts, handwritten notes, medical forms, emails, a story that dates back to Meghan's late teens, back before the fame, back before Harry. Back when Thomas says Meghan was a vulnerable young woman facing a devastating diagnosis. He claims it was endometriosis. Advanced, aggressive, pain that left her hospitalized more than once. Doctors warned her of fertility issues, told her she might never conceive. And in a moment of despair, Thomas says Meghan made the hardest decision of her life. She had surgery, and allegedly, it wasn't just exploratory. According to Thomas, it was definitive, a full hysterectomy. He says she cried for weeks, refused to tell her friends, disappeared from social events, threw herself into acting auditions, buried the trauma beneath a polished smile. But here's the twist. Years later, when Meghan began dating Prince Harry, Thomas noticed a shift. Suddenly, Meghan's old fears about motherhood vanished from conversation. She started making statements about wanting children, joking about being a boy mom, planning for nurseries, baby showers, royal family planning. And that's when Thomas says the red flags started to fly. He allegedly asked her point blank, "But how?" She told him not to ask questions, that things were different now, that she'd found another way. And when he pushed for more, she stopped taking his calls. He was ghosted, shut out. And just months later, Archie was born. But Thomas wasn't invited to the birth, or the christening, or even given a single photo. And as the years passed, as more documentaries were released, as Meghan gave speeches about motherhood and children and miscarriages, Thomas sat in silence, watching, hurting, wondering, was it all just an illusion? He tried to convince himself it wasn't his place, that maybe Meghan had found a miracle method, maybe science had changed, maybe he was wrong. But then came the private investigator. A former Hollywood fixer, now semi-retired, contacted Thomas with a dossier, allegedly filled with background checks, travel records, medical appointments. One line stood out. Confirmed patient history, 2011. Full hysterectomy, Cedars-Sinai. And suddenly, Thomas says everything clicked. If this was true, if the surgery really happened, then everything else was a performance. The pregnancies, the hospital photos, the carefully orchestrated narratives of miscarriage and rainbow baby redemption. All of it. And now he's ready to talk. Because Thomas believes the public deserves to know the truth. Not just about the surgery, but about the person behind the brand. The woman behind the Duchess. The daughter behind the veil. He says he has no interest in attacking Meghan. That he still loves her, despite everything. But he can't watch her rewrite history anymore. Not while the truth is sitting in his desk drawer. Not while the world worships a narrative he believes is built on deception. Is he right? Is he bitter? Is he exposing the truth, or simply seeking revenge? That's what this video is going to uncover. Chapter by chapter, secret by secret. From the letter Meghan allegedly wrote during her recovery, to the missing Daily Mail interview that was never aired, to the private investigator's mysterious file, to the royals who may have known and stayed silent. We're not here to spread gossip. We're here to unravel a mystery that could shake the very foundations of the Sussex brand. And we're starting with the moment that finally broke Thomas Markle's silence. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What finally makes a man explode after years of being ignored by his own daughter? Was it the glitzy awards show where she pretended he didn't exist? Was it the Netflix millions while he struggled with medical bills? Or was it something deeper? Something so personal, so soul-piercing, that even a camera-shy, scandal-wary man like Thomas Markle finally said enough? Let's rewind. Because Thomas didn't wake up one morning and decide to nuke his daughter's public image. This wasn't some overnight tantrum. No, this was slow, methodical, brewing for years. But the match? The spark that lit the fuse? That came just 3 months ago, in the most unexpected and, frankly, humiliating way imaginable. You see, Thomas had spent the better part of 2025 hoping things might finally change. Not expecting a miracle, just a call, a text, a crumb of human decency. After all, he wasn't asking for a royal invitation. He just wanted to meet his grandchildren. Archie, Lilibet, the 2 children he's never seen, not in person, not on FaceTime, not even through a postcard. Imagine that, being the biological grandfather of 2 of the most photographed children on Earth, and being completely erased. Now here's where things start to burn. According to close sources, and we're talking people who've worked with Thomas, visited his Rosarito home, heard the raw voicemail messages. This man wasn't stewing in anger. He was mourning the daughter he once drove to school, the little girl who used to sit in his lap and call him daddy, the girl who'd cry over auditions and call him after heartbreaks. Gone. And then came the final insult. It wasn't a tabloid headline. It wasn't a Netflix edit. It was a private invitation to someone else. Thomas had allegedly been tipped off that Oprah Winfrey, yes, the same Oprah who helped orchestrate Meghan's globally televised royal takedown, was sent a custom invitation to attend Lilibet's upcoming birthday celebration in California. Think about that. Oprah, a billionaire, a TV titan, not related by blood, not connected through marriage. But she got the nod. She got the invite. She was considered safe. While Thomas, Meghan's own father, was blacklisted. Now, we can't confirm the full guest list, but multiple insiders say Thomas was devastated. Not just hurt, gutted. And that's when he made the call. Not to TMZ, not to the tabloids, to an old journalist friend he hadn't spoken to in over a decade. A man named Jerry, a pseudonym Will used to protect his identity, who once covered Meghan's early Hollywood rise. Jerry had been waiting for this moment. He'd heard the rumors, seen the files. He knew there were secrets Thomas had never shared. And this time, Thomas didn't hold back. He told me, "I don't care anymore," Jerry said. "I've got nothing left to lose. She wants me gone. Fine. But I'm not going quietly." And with that, the floodgates opened. For the first time, Thomas allegedly began speaking, really speaking, about what he'd kept locked inside for over a decade. It wasn't just about being ghosted. It was about deception, manipulation, and one life-altering secret. A surgery, a story, a silence that had eaten away at him for years. He told Jerry everything, from the day Meghan first told him about her health problems, to the moment she asked him to never mention it again, to the feeling he had when she stood on Oprah's lawn, wearing a designer dress and cradling a baby bump, speaking about miscarriage, rainbow babies, and motherhood as if nothing had ever happened. That was the moment, Thomas said, when he realized, "I don't know who she is anymore." But let's not oversimplify. This wasn't just about a party invite. This was a culmination, a slow-boiling storm of hurt, confusion, and outright disbelief. Let's break it down. Over the years, Thomas tried to reach out. Quietly, privately. We're talking handwritten letters, mailed to known addresses, voicemails, messages relayed through family, even public pleas on breakfast television. And each time, silence. Or worse, curated mockery. Because while Thomas was being painted as an out-of-touch old man, desperately clinging to his 15 minutes of fame, Meghan was building an empire on victimhood. The estranged father's storyline worked. It sold. It gave her credibility, pain, grit. The girl who rose above a toxic, problematic parent. But what if that wasn't the full story? What if Thomas wasn't toxic? What if he was just inconvenient? Someone who knew too much? Someone who couldn't be controlled? That's the claim Thomas began making. Not in public, yet, but to people he trusted. And one of those people was a former assistant, now turned whistleblower. We'll call her Lisa. Lisa worked briefly for Thomas during his time as a lighting director in Hollywood. They kept in touch after Meghan got her big break. In 2021, Lisa says she was approached by a former publicist from Meghan's early PR days. The conversation? Simple, but chilling. She told me, "If Thomas ever talks, we bury him. Legally. Publicly. He's the last loose thread." At first, Lisa didn't believe it. Thought it was just PR posturing. But now, looking back, she says it all makes sense. Thomas wasn't just being pushed aside, he was being erased. Because what he knew could disrupt the very foundation of Meghan's rebirth story. A rebirth that included a family she allegedly wasn't biologically capable of having. Now let's take a breath. Because I know what some of you are thinking. Why didn't Thomas come forward earlier? Why wait until now? Why stay silent through the wedding, through the Netflix show, through everything? Here's the hard truth. He was scared. Not of Meghan, but of what it would do to her. Thomas truly believed, at least for a time, that protecting Meghan meant keeping quiet. He hoped she'd come around. That one day, she'd reach out. Apologize. Reconnect. Let him into her children's lives. But that hope? That illusion? It died the moment he saw Lilibet's birthday cake on Instagram. Strangers, celebrities, stylists, all gathered around. And Thomas? Sitting alone in Rosarito, with oxygen tubes, watching his family celebrate without him. That was the final straw. And that's when the interviews began. Not one, not two, but 5 recorded sessions with journalists and former producers, some dating back to his Hollywood days. He started piecing together timelines, rereading old notes, digging through boxes of letters and receipts. He was building a case, not just a media expose, but a living diary of every moment he says Meghan tried to rewrite. From teenage doctor visits, to whispered confessions about infertility, to a scribbled note she left on his kitchen table after a heated argument. No one ever has to know. Please don't ruin this for me. Those were her words, Thomas says. And for a long time, he honored them. But not anymore. Not after being erased from his grandchildren's lives. Not after being painted as a cartoonish villain while Meghan raked in millions for sharing her side of the story. Thomas wants balance. He wants truth. And whether or not the public believes him, he says he's finally ready to tell it all. But what came next wasn't a headline. It was a letter, written in Meghan's own handwriting. A letter that Thomas kept hidden for nearly 2 decades. And what it revealed, no one, not even her biggest critics, saw coming. Where was Meghan Markle during the final semester of senior year? Why did she abruptly vanish from the spotlight, even from her tight-knit circle of friends, for nearly 6 months at the age of 19? And why has no one, not even her most dedicated biographers, ever been able to fully account for that missing chapter of her life? Let's go back. Long before she was a duchess, before she was Rachel Zane on Suits, before Oprah interviews and royal titles. Meghan Markle was just a driven teenager growing up in Los Angeles, balancing private school pressure with Hollywood dreams. But somewhere around late 2000 to early 2001, something shifted. According to classmates from Immaculate Heart High School and early college friends from Northwestern, there was a period when Meghan simply disappeared. She didn't show up for a few key events, missed classes, was suddenly unavailable. Some thought she had gone on a secret modeling trip. Others whispered about an out-of-state internship or drama camp. But Thomas Markle claims it was something far more serious, far more painful. He says his daughter wasn't chasing a Hollywood opportunity. She was recovering from an invasive, life-altering surgery. He says Meghan, barely 19, had undergone a hysterectomy. Now, to be clear, this is an explosive claim, not something said lightly, not something you find in glossy magazines or tidy press releases. This is the kind of secret that lives in hospital records and handwritten letters. And Thomas says he still has the letter Meghan wrote him during that time. A letter he's never shown, never sold, never leaked, until now. Before we get to the contents of that letter, let's understand what led to that alleged moment. Thomas describes a 2-year period leading up to 2001, where Meghan began suffering from unexplained, excruciating abdominal pain. Doctors initially thought it was stress, diet, or just a side effect of growing up. But the pain persisted, intensified, frequent hospital visits, emergency room trips in the middle of the night. And finally, a name was given to the pain: endometriosis, a condition where tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside of it, often causing extreme pain, hormonal imbalance, and, in many cases, infertility. Thomas recalls the diagnosis as a devastating moment. She came home crying, he reportedly told an interviewer in a never-aired clip from 2015. She kept saying, "What if I can't ever be a mom? What if no one wants me after this?" It broke my heart. And then, the bombshell decision. Doctors allegedly advised Meghan that her condition was aggressive, that the usual rounds of hormone therapy weren't working, that the pain was escalating. One option was to continue with treatment. The other? Radical but final. A full hysterectomy. According to Thomas, Meghan agonized over the decision. They argued. They cried. He begged her to wait. She insisted she couldn't live with the pain anymore. And so, one quiet morning, he says he drove her to Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. No fanfare, no entourage, just a father and a daughter holding hands in silence. "She squeezed my fingers so tight," Thomas allegedly said. And before she went in, she whispered, "Please don't tell anyone. This can't be part of my story." And that's when she gave him the letter. It was written on simple line notebook paper. No royal monogram. No stylized font. Just ink and raw emotion. In it, Meghan reportedly explained why she was making the decision. How she'd already cried for months. How she felt like her body had betrayed her. How she feared becoming undesirable or broken. But what stood out most was one line. "If I ever become someone, I need this to stay buried. No one can know, not even future partners. Especially not the public. Let that sink in. Thomas says he kept the letter in a locked fireproof box in his Rosarito home for 2 decades. Never showed it to anyone. Not even Meghan's half-siblings. Not even close friends. He says he believed her, respected her wishes. Until now. Until the Oprah interview. Until the baby photo ops. The maternity bump cradling. The Netflix doc where Meghan sobbed about a miscarriage and the joy of becoming a mother again. It wasn't the stories themselves that rattled Thomas. It was the performance. The way, he claims, Meghan stood in front of the world and played the part of the doting mother. The victim of royal coldness. The woman of rainbow baby resilience. All while, allegedly, the truth sat in a drawer in Mexico. Now, let's consider the possibility. What if Thomas is right? What if Meghan really did undergo a hysterectomy at 19? What if the children, Archie and Lilibet, were conceived through surrogacy, donation, or adoption, but never disclosed as such? Would that change public opinion? Would it change yours? And if Thomas knew, who else did? Here's where it gets even murkier. There's a documented 6-month gap in Meghan's early college timeline. During this time, she didn't enroll in classes. No credits appear on her transcript. No documented internships or theater programs. And several friends from her early days at Northwestern recall receiving vague replies to emails. Things like, I'm not around right now, working on myself. In LA for a bit, dealing with stuff. No one thought to question it then. But looking back, the silence is deafening. And here's where the contradictions start stacking up. In 2013, Meghan gave an interview to a lifestyle blog, talking about how she always wanted to be a mom. She described her dream of having a big family one day. In 2015, she spoke at a women's health panel about tracking her cycle and being in tune with her body. Yet, nowhere does she mention the intense medical struggle Thomas claims she faced in her teens. And maybe that's her right. Not every woman wants to disclose her private health history. Not every trauma needs to be broadcast. But the issue here isn't just about privacy. It's about presentation. Meghan's entire public identity has been meticulously shaped around motherhood, fertility, and personal resilience. From Oprah to Spotify, she's leaned heavily into the narrative of mother of 2, struggling with pregnancy loss, battling racism in the press while nurturing babies. So if, as Thomas claims, she's been hiding a surgical truth that would make that narrative impossible, what does that mean? Is it deception, self-protection, or something darker? Some critics argue Thomas is simply bitter, that he's twisting teenage pain into a smear campaign. But others, especially those close to the Markle family, believe he's telling the truth. There are whispers of Cedars-Sinai records. A nurse who allegedly remembers a young girl who cried through the entire prep. A discharge file never properly erased. A payment slip with Thomas's signature. Even more disturbing? A claim that Meghan's medical history was red-flagged during royal background checks before the 2018 wedding, but deliberately kept quiet to avoid scandal. We'll get to that in a later chapter. But for now, let's circle back to that missing semester. Why was it never explained? Why did no one press for answers during the Oprah interview? Or in the Netflix docuseries? Why does her authorized biography completely skip over that period? And why, after all these years, is her father the only one brave, or reckless, enough to talk about it? Because here's the brutal truth. If what Thomas is saying is even partially true, it means the entire royal succession line may be based on a lie. And while Meghan continues her public rebranding, preparing new Hollywood deals and children's books about family love, Thomas is sitting alone in Rosarito, clutching a crumpled, 2-decade-old letter that says, "No one ever has to know." But the world is starting to know now. And what comes next isn't just another emotional story. It's the letter itself, the one that changed everything. It wasn't just a letter. It was a confession, a time capsule, a ticking time bomb wrapped in lined paper and sealed with a teenage girl's desperation. It wasn't supposed to survive this long. It wasn't meant for public eyes. And yet, 2 decades later, it may be the most damning piece of evidence Thomas Markle ever held. But before we dive into the words that Meghan Markle allegedly wrote with her own hand, let's ask a question. Why would a woman so obsessed with image, with control, with narrative, write anything at all? Because when you're 19 years old, in pain, scared, and convinced your body has failed you, sometimes you don't think like a duchess. You think like a daughter. According to Thomas, that letter wasn't crafted to manipulate. It wasn't part of some long-con deception. It was raw, human, full of vulnerability. And that's precisely why it's so shocking now. Let's set the scene. It was early 2001. Meghan had just returned home from another emergency doctor's visit. Thomas recalls that day with eerie clarity. She was quiet. Too quiet. No snark. No eye rolls. Just silence. He asked her if she wanted tea. She shook her head. He asked if she wanted to talk. She said, later. Then she went into her childhood bedroom, shut the door, and didn't come out for 3 hours. When she did, she handed him an envelope. White. Thin. No name on the front. Inside, a 4-page letter, written in a hurried scrawl. Thomas never showed it to anyone. Not even Meghan's mother, Doria. But after years of silence, heartbreak, and public humiliation, he decided to let a trusted journalist transcribe it word for word. We won't read the entire thing here, but we'll highlight the sections Thomas claims are most important. And make no mistake, these words, if authentic, change everything. Daddy, I need you to know I'm okay. I've made a decision, and it's not what you wanted. I know you'll be mad. Please don't try to talk me out of it. Already, we're plunged into conflict. A daughter preparing to go against her father's wishes. The doctors say this is my best option. They've tried everything. The pain is everywhere now. I just wanted to stop. I'm tired of pretending it's manageable. It's not. It hasn't been for a long time. This line caught Thomas off guard. He told the interviewer he hadn't realized just how bad it had gotten. Meghan had always put on a brave face, smiling through auditions, rehearsing lines, hiding her heat packs. But behind the scenes, she was unraveling. I don't know what this means for the future. I don't know if I'll ever get married, or if anyone will love me knowing I can't be a real mom. That word, infertile, it makes me feel dirty. Like broken machinery. Like someone who failed at being a woman before I even became one. Can we pause on that? Think about the emotional weight of a 19-year-old writing that. Infertility isn't just a medical condition. It's an identity crisis. And for a girl raised in a city where image is everything, where perfection is currency, this diagnosis didn't just attack her uterus. It attacked her future. Thomas claims that this paragraph haunted him for years. He would reread it at night and wonder if he had done enough, if he should have pushed harder, sought a second opinion. But the letter continues. Please don't tell anyone. Not friends. Not mom. Not Grandma Jeanette. I can't have this following me. If I ever make it, if I ever become someone, this can't be part of my story. That's the line. The one that lingers like a ghost. This can't be part of my story. Thomas says this was the moment he realized Meghan didn't just want privacy. She wanted reinvention. This wasn't about shame. This was about strategy. And it worked. From that day forward, Thomas says Meghan never again mentioned the surgery. She recovered quietly, moved forward like it never happened, and slowly re-entered the world of auditions, press junkets, and Hollywood mingling. Friends were told she'd had a minor procedure to remove ovarian cysts. Others were told she'd taken a semester off for mental health. No one questioned it. Why would they? Meghan was always composed, always polished. If she said she was fine, people believed her. But Thomas didn't forget, especially not when the pregnancies began. Fast forward to 2018. Meghan was glowing, married into royalty, and suddenly, the media was full of headlines about baby bumps and biological children. Thomas remembers sitting on his worn couch, watching the news, and feeling his stomach turn. He thought, how? Was it a miracle? Had the doctors been wrong? Or was something else going on? He claims he tried to reach out, left voicemails, wrote letters. He just wanted clarity, closure, maybe even a simple explanation. But instead, he got silence. And then, the lawsuits. That's right. Thomas says Meghan's team began sending quiet legal threats around this time. Nothing formal. No court orders. Just suggestions, phrased carefully. Lawyers reaching out to mutual contacts, implying that if Thomas were to speak publicly about Meghan's teenage medical history, he could be hit with defamation or harassment suits. He was stunned. They wanted me to pretend my own memory didn't exist, he reportedly told Jerry, the journalist he confided in. They wanted me to erase my daughter's pain so she could keep her perfect story intact. But for a while he complied. He stayed silent. And then Archie was born. And then Lilibet. And the fairy tale kept expanding. But every time Thomas saw Meghan on screen, smiling, speaking about motherhood, about her difficult journey, about the blessing of giving birth, he says it felt like watching someone else's life, like watching a scripted performance. And that's when he opened the box with the letter, the one piece of Meghan's past no PR team could spin, no palace could scrub, no stylist could rewrite. Now let's be clear. There are critics who say the letter proves nothing, that even if Meghan wrote it, people change. Medical science evolves. Surrogacy exists. Hormonal therapy can delay certain conditions. That maybe the letter was dramatic, but not definitive. And that's fair. But the timing of the letter, the consistency of Thomas's story, and the details it allegedly contains, details that match early school absences, medical appointments, and financial transactions, make it more than just teenage angst. This is a first-hand account of a young woman grappling with a life-altering reality. And it's a direct contradiction to everything she's presented since becoming a royal. So why now? Why did Thomas decide to release the letter in 2025? He says it wasn't about revenge. It was about legacy. His legacy. He's 81. His health is failing. He's estranged from the daughter he once adored. He hasn't met his grandchildren. And he says he's tired of being the villain in someone else's script. I don't want to die with this secret, he told a source. I want the world to know I was there. I know what happened. And I kept my promise. Until she made it impossible to keep. It's hard not to feel the weight of that. A father's love. A daughter's ambition. A letter buried for 20 years. And now? Now it's out. And if you think that's where the story ends, think again. Because the letter wasn't the only thing Thomas kept. He also kept copies of medical bills, names of doctors, notes from hospital visits. And just when he thought the trail had gone cold, someone from Meghan's past reached out. A name no one expected. A stylist from her suits days who remembered something odd about Meghan's contracts. Something that hinted she may have been hiding more than just her surgery. But what came next wasn't just a whisper. It was a warning. A warning that Meghan's Hollywood past might hold even more secrets. In Hollywood, silence isn't always ignorance. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's fear. And sometimes it's survival. Because in the city where everyone talks, it's the people who don't speak that you should worry about. That's the part no one tells you. And when it comes to Meghan Markle, former actress turned royal icon, turned global brand, Hollywood knew more than it ever let on. The whispers started long before she married Prince Harry. Long before Buckingham Palace and Oprah Winfrey and Archewell Foundation dinners. They began in casting rooms, on set trailers, around makeup mirrors, and late-night wine-fueled gossip among stylists and producers. But the one rule everyone followed? Don't say anything out loud. And definitely not on record. Because the woman now known as the Duchess of Sussex had built something powerful, a narrative so pristine, so carefully cultivated, that questioning it became taboo. But what if those whispers were based on something real? What if Meghan's teenage hysterectomy wasn't just a family secret, but something Hollywood insiders began suspecting years ago? Let's go back to 2012. Meghan had just landed a breakout role on Suits. Rachel Zane, paralegal, fashion icon, smart-mouthed romantic lead. The show quickly became a sleeper hit. And Meghan? A rising star. But behind the scenes, some noticed peculiarities. Take Danielle, again, not her real name, who worked as a costume assistant during Meghan's early Suit seasons. In a recently unearthed deposition, yes, it's real and buried deep in a leaked civil suit, Danielle recalled. She always requested looser waistlines. Always. Even when the scene called for form-fitting dresses. She'd tell the costume lead, it needs to hang, not hug. At first, no one thought much of it. Actors have preferences. Stylists adapt. But then came the conversation that changed everything. Danielle says one day, while steaming a silk blouse in the wardrobe trailer, she overheard Meghan quietly confiding in the hairstylist. She said something like, I don't deal with that monthly stuff anymore. Haven't in years. The stylist reportedly joked, lucky you. But Meghan's tone shifted. She said, it's not luck. It's a consequence. Then she clammed up. Danielle didn't press. But she remembered. Because Meghan's face, her tone, it didn't feel casual. It felt like confession. From there, more small details started stacking up. Makeup artists noted how Meghan's skin was dry, unnaturally so, for someone in her early 30s. Her hair team was reportedly asked to use specific hormone-safe products. She once requested hot water bottles during filming, not for cramps, but for scar tissue flare-ups. And then came the contracts. A former producer, who worked closely with Meghan on a short-lived pilot before Suits, claimed she had an unusual clause in her contract. No physical examinations or fitness tests required without prior written approval. That clause stood out, because for most actors, especially women, physicals were standard. Part of insurance, liability, all of it. But Meghan allegedly insisted on full control over any medical inquiries. Now sure, some might say she was protecting herself. Maybe she'd been burned before. Maybe she just didn't trust producers. But coupled with everything else, the loose outfits, the scar flares, the cryptic remarks, it painted a different picture. One that quietly made its way through Hollywood's whisper network. And the question began to surface. Is Meghan Markle hiding something about her fertility? Of course, no one dared say it publicly. Especially not after she started dating Harry. Because suddenly, Meghan wasn't just a working actress. She was royalty adjacent. And when that relationship exploded into headlines, the whispers went underground. But they didn't stop. In fact, they intensified. A former studio publicist who once pitched Meghan for a wellness brand revealed that every PR campaign she was involved in included strict narrative guidelines. No mention of family. No questions about children. No pregnancy discussions. She'd joke, let's keep it about skincare, not ovaries. But there was always an edge. Like, ask the wrong thing and you're off the list. And then came the bizarre red carpet moment. An awards show in LA. Meghan was presenting, wearing a black high-neck gown. When asked on the carpet if she wanted children someday, she smiled, tight-lipped, and replied, "The future's a mystery. But for now, I'm just nurturing my career." The reporter laughed, but Meghan didn't. Later that night, a photographer claims she was overheard in the green room, snapping at her assistant. "I told you." And no fertility questions. This is why I hate these things. Was it just stress? Or was it a panic reaction to a narrative she couldn't fully control? Because let's not forget, this was all before Harry. Before the baby bumps. Before the royal maternity glow. Before the sanitized documentaries. Back then, Meghan was just a rising star with a fiercely guarded image. And then she started dating a prince. And the narrative shifted overnight. From career-first feminist to relatable fairy tale bride. From don't ask about kids to I want a big family. Hollywood insiders were stunned. Some were thrilled, others skeptical, but all of them tight-lipped. Because when someone becomes royalty, you don't just gossip about them. You bury the whispers. Or you get buried. One producer who worked on a canceled Meghan project told a journalist under condition of anonymity. Once she got serious with Harry, we were told to destroy all archived footage of behind the scenes. Anything showing her stressed, sick, or tired. The goal was to erase the human stuff, build the Duchess image. But one thing they couldn't erase. The stylists, the assistants, the makeup artists, the people who saw Meghan before she became untouchable. And one of them, an on-set nurse hired for a commercial shoot, remembers something that still haunts her. She winced while sitting. Kept adjusting. Finally whispered, "Sorry. Scar tissue from an old surgery. It acts up sometimes." I asked if she needed anything. She said, "No one can know." That phrase again. No one can know. It echoes across every story. Across every room Meghan entered before the crown. And that's why, when Thomas came forward with the letter, with the claims of the surgery at 19, with the suggestion that Meghan's maternity stories were carefully crafted PR illusions, Hollywood didn't scream in outrage. It paused, because deep down, many already suspected. They just didn't dare confirm. And for those few who tried, let's talk about what happened to one tabloid freelancer. In 2018, shortly after Meghan's pregnancy with Archie was announced, a freelance gossip columnist, known for digging into celebrity medical records, pitched a story. The angle? That there were no OBGYN records on file for Meghan in California during the alleged IVF prep months. That her listed healthcare providers hadn't treated her in years. He reached out to a known medical center, off the record. Within 48 hours, his editor pulled the story. He received 2 legal threats. and his email access was temporarily disabled by the outlet's IT department. He never pitched another Meghan Markle story again. Now, whether that was coincidence or coordinated damage control, we can't say, but it fits the pattern. A pattern where Meghan's past, especially her medical past, is protected like state secrets. So here's the question no one in Hollywood ever asked out loud. What if the whole motherhood storyline is curated? And not in the malicious, manipulative way some assume, but in the survival sense. A woman who feared the world would label her broken, who feared her infertility would overshadow her talent, who saw how Hollywood chews up women who can't fit the mold. So she rewrote her narrative, piece by piece, image by image, until no one dared question it. But there's still one group who had to question it, who couldn't afford to overlook even one detail. The royal family. And before the wedding, before the titles, before the million-pound deals, they ran their own investigation. And according to a source deep inside the palace's medical vetting team, they did find something. But what they did next will leave you speechless. They had the footage. They had the name. They had the hospital room number, the discharge papers, even a quote from an anonymous nurse. And then, just like that, it vanished. No one published it. No one leaked it. No one dared touch it. TMZ, the same outlet that had never blinked at airing DUI mugshots, leaked police audio, or backroom brawls, suddenly went silent. Why? Because the woman at the center of the story wasn't just an actress anymore. She was about to become a duchess. And the story? It could have derailed everything. Let's rewind. It was late summer 2017. Just before Meghan Markle's engagement to Prince Harry would become official. Paparazzi were circling like vultures. Royal gossip was at a fever pitch. And one TMZ producer, let's call him R, got a tip that stopped him cold. A source inside Cedars-Sinai Hospital claimed they had seen Meghan Markle admitted in early 2001 for a major gynecological procedure. The exact words? It was serious, not cosmetic. She was in a lot of pain. Post-op instructions were consistent with hysterectomy aftercare. That was big, huge, dangerous. If it was true, and Meghan had indeed undergone a full hysterectomy at 19, then the upcoming royal engagement, the narrative around her motherhood dreams, and the entire Sussex fairy tale might have required editing. R did what any hotshot Hollywood gossip producer would do. He sent a freelance journalist, someone with hospital contacts, to verify the lead. And that's when things started getting weird. First, they tracked down a nurse who had worked part-time in the gynecology ward at the time. She didn't want to be named, but she remembered a mixed-race girl, late teens, very pretty, came in for urgent surgery, looked absolutely terrified. When asked for more details, she said this. She cried before anesthesia, said something about never being able to carry a child. I remember that. Was it Meghan? She couldn't be 100% sure. But the timing, the description, the paperwork, all lined up. The nurse offered to check old logs, saying she still had access to a few internal databases used for retirement verification. Then she went silent. Within 48 hours, she ghosted R. Emails bounced. Phone disconnected. No one could reach her again. Next, the TMZ team tried reaching out to Cedars-Sinai for an official comment. Standard procedure. No real expectation of confirmation. Just checking boxes. But the response they got? Unusually swift. And unusually aggressive. A senior legal representative responded within hours, not days, with a pointed message. Ms. Markle is not, and never has been, a patient under the name you have provided. Further inquiries on this matter may constitute a breach of patient confidentiality, and legal escalation may follow. Except here's the twist. The TMZ team had provided the wrong name. On purpose. A slightly altered spelling of Meghan's full name, Rachel Meghan Markle. They wanted to see if the hospital would acknowledge or deny without realizing the error. And yet, the hospital responded as if they knew exactly who they were talking about. That raised red flags. Suddenly, Art got nervous. He brought the story to his supervisor, who immediately pulled the plug. Official reason? Not enough to go on. Not a slam dunk. Royal engagement makes this a legal minefield. Unofficially, word started spreading that Meghan's lawyers, via backchannel, had gotten wind of the inquiry. They'd issued private warnings to several outlets. Not official lawsuits, just suggestions, messages along the lines of, if certain archived claims are revisited, we will be forced to respond accordingly. We hope to maintain a positive relationship with the press. You know what that means. Power move, pressure, and TMZ? For once, they blinked. The footage they had. An interview with a former hospital billing clerk who claimed to have processed Meghan's surgical payment in 2001. Deleted. The quotes scrubbed from the server. The story buried. One staffer claims it was marked in the internal database as "Do not publish," vetted by legal. Let that sit for a second. The same tabloid that aired Lamar Odom's hospital photos and Mel Gibson's rants on a loop wouldn't touch this. Why? Because Meghan wasn't just a scandal anymore. She was a machine. A narrative. A brand. A duchess in waiting. And when you go up against that machine, you get flattened. But here's where it gets even more chilling. 2 months later, that same hospital clerk who had agreed to speak off the record vanished. Not literally, but figuratively. Quit her job. Moved out of LA. Deleted every trace of herself from social media. Even her LinkedIn disappeared. One TMZ intern tracked her down via an old Facebook post. Messaged her. No reply. But the intern says she saw one final status before it vanished. Sometimes the truth isn't worth the price. Some stories are safer untold. Now you tell me, is that a coincidence? Or is that a warning? Because it wasn't just TMZ. Several months later, another outlet, Radar Online, briefly flirted with a similar angle. They had a sidebar planned for a feature on Meghan's Hollywood transformation. Something like, From Setback to Stardom, Meghan's Secret Struggles in Early 2000s. The draft included a vague line about a medical leave Meghan took from school and auditions during 2001. Nothing graphic. Nothing specific. Still, it never made print. The editor reportedly got a phone call. No one knows from who. The line removed. The sidebar cut. The article published. Clean. Curated. Unquestioned. And the world kept spinning. But Thomas Markle noticed. He noticed how these stories kept disappearing. How any trace of Meghan's medical past was being wiped clean. How even the most ruthless gossip sites treated her like radioactive material. And he started asking himself the question no father wants to ask. Why is she so desperate to hide this? According to Thomas, he reached out to one former TMZ contact in 2020. Asked him bluntly why the story never ran. The reply? Too messy. Too risky. She's royalty now. It's not just scandal, it's geopolitics. That was the moment Thomas says he realized the truth. She wasn't hiding the surgery anymore. She was hiding the lie that came after. Because by then, Archie had been born. Lilibet had been announced. And the palace had stayed silent. Meghan's brand was no longer about an actress who overcame illness. It was about a mother, a nurturer, the woman who humanized the monarchy through maternal warmth and the struggle of every woman. But if she couldn't physically bear children, if that entire layer was crafted post-surgery, it could unravel everything. Thomas says that's when he started collecting emails, photos, statements, the original letter, and most disturbingly, a voicemail Meghan left him in 2018, shortly after her engagement. In it, she allegedly says, "I know what you know, and I'm asking you to forget it. This isn't about truth. It's about my future. Please don't ruin it." Let's pause. That's not a threat. It's a plea. A daughter begging her father not to speak, not to remind the world of the part of her that didn't fit the brand. And for years, he didn't. He stayed silent. But silence, Thomas says, is a burden, especially when it's carrying the weight of a truth no one else will say. So when TMZ buried the story, when the nurse vanished, when Radar pulled their line and the mainstream press refused to ask questions, Thomas made a decision. If no one else will tell the truth, I will. But as he prepared to go public, something unexpected happened. A man claiming to be a former royal liaison reached out to him. Said he'd worked as a discreet investigator for the palace before the wedding. And he had a message for Thomas. We knew, but we couldn't say anything. You'll want to hear this. What if the person you trusted the most, the one you married, built a family with, defended to the world, wasn't telling you the whole truth? Not about where they came from, not about who they really were, but about something even more intimate, more devastating. What if they'd hidden something about their body? That's the question now haunting Prince Harry. At least, according to Thomas Markle, and the ex-palace liaison who came forward with a stunning claim. Prince Harry was never supposed to know. Let that settle for a moment. Because if that's true, if Harry, The man who left his country, severed ties with his family, and upended centuries of royal tradition for Meghan, wasn't told about her alleged hysterectomy? Then everything changes. Every moment of tenderness, every clip of Meghan and Harry giggling about babies, every carefully staged photo of Archie's toes or Lilibet's birthday cake. It all takes on a new weight. And perhaps a new tragedy. Let's rewind to 2016. Meghan and Harry had just begun dating in secret. Their relationship was fiery, fast, intense. He was a war veteran with a tortured past. She was a confident, glamorous actress with charm to spare. But what was really happening behind closed doors? According to multiple sources, including staffers who worked at Kensington Palace at the time, there was a rapid shift in how Meghan presented herself during the early stages of the relationship. Gone was the ultra-private, PR-guarded woman from Suits sets. In came a fiercely maternal, family-oriented woman, someone who talked, often and deliberately, about wanting children. And Harry? He was hooked. Because here's the thing most people forget. Harry had made no secret of his desire to be a father. He spoke openly in past interviews about how much he loved kids. He adored his nephews and niece. He'd said repeatedly that he wanted a big family. And Meghan played into that. Hard. In one now infamous quote from a 2017 BBC engagement interview, Meghan leans into Harry and laughs. One step at a time. Hopefully we'll start a family in the near future. But Thomas Markle? He wasn't laughing. He was confused. Deeply confused. Because if Meghan had, in fact, undergone a hysterectomy in her teens, then the future family she was teasing would require extraordinary measures. And yet, according to Thomas, she never once mentioned surrogacy to Harry. Not once. How does he know? Because he asked her. In a private phone call just after the engagement was announced, Thomas says he brought up the topic gently. How are you going to handle the baby thing? Does he know? He claims Meghan's reply was cold, dismissive. You don't need to worry about that. Then she hung up. After that, communication grew icy. Now, some might argue that Thomas was overstepping, that it wasn't his business, that Meghan had every right to keep her medical history private. But this wasn't just about privacy. This was about deception. Because according to the ex-palace liaison, let's call him Martin, there were red flags even before the wedding. Martin claims he was part of a discreet vetting team tasked with preparing background files for royal archives. This included everything from legal entanglements to health disclosures. While the royals don't conduct full-blown investigations into fiancés, there's always a quiet scan. And what Martin says they found was a medical anomaly. There was a discrepancy in Meghan's early health records. Not a smoking gun, but enough to raise concern. An indication of a serious procedure in her late teens. Martin claims this information was flagged internally, but never escalated. Why? Because, as he puts it, by that point, Harry was already too deep. And the optics of questioning Meghan, an American biracial actress, were politically toxic. So the palace made a choice. They shelved it. Didn't ask. Didn't confirm. Didn't warn. They let it go. And now? They regret it. Martin says that after Meghan's pregnancies, internal palace chatter reignited. Not because of racism, not because of elitism, but because the timeline didn't make sense. Doctors who had assisted other royal births noticed that Meghan's deliveries, especially Archie's, were unusually private. No standard OB team. No Lindo wing fanfare. No official birth certificate for weeks. And when the documents did arrive, some noticed unusual omissions. No attending physician name. No delivery location. Just enough ambiguity to spark quiet whispers. Still, the palace stayed silent. Why? Because if it was true, if Meghan couldn't biologically bear children and had kept that from Harry, then admitting it would risk scandal at a biblical scale. Not just PR damage. Not just tabloid frenzy. But questions about royal succession. Because here's the brutal legal reality. If a royal heir is born via surrogacy, and the fact is hidden or misrepresented to the crown, it could theoretically undermine their place in the line of succession. No one wants to say it. But behind closed doors, they have. Martin claims there were late-night meetings. Memos exchanged between aides. Lawyers consulted. But ultimately, the palace decided it was too late. Harry was married. Archie was born. The world had accepted the narrative. Changing it now would have been nuclear. But was Harry ever in on it? That's where the heartbreak lives. Because according to Thomas, and even Martin, Prince Harry may have been the last to know, and possibly still doesn't. Let that sink in. What if Harry, blinded by love, manipulated by PR, and desperate to protect his new family, simply never asked? Or worse, what if he did, and was told what he wanted to hear? Let's explore that. Meghan is a skilled communicator, a trained actress. She understands timing, tone, narrative flow. If Harry ever raised questions about IVF, fertility, medical history, it wouldn't be hard to imagine her offering a vague, emotional answer that sidestepped the truth. Maybe she said it was difficult. Maybe she hinted at past struggles. Maybe she said, "We're figuring it out together." And maybe Harry, eager to believe, never pressed. Some say that's naive. Others say it's love. But here's what we do know. When Meghan announced her pregnancy with Archie, even close royal aides were shocked. Martin recalls the reaction vividly. There were raised eyebrows. I remember someone saying, "Already?" Like it caught everyone off guard. No one was prepared. The announcement itself was low-key. No press conference. No formal photos. Just a bump cradled in a black and white image shared online. Then, silence. And when Archie was born, even more silence. No delivery room photo. No hospital steps reveal. No waving royals outside the Lindo wing. It was all off. Controlled. Sanitized. And that's when speculation exploded online. Forums lit up. Was Meghan hiding something? Was the baby carried by someone else? Was there a reason they refused to name the hospital? And through it all, Harry defended her. Fiercely. Passionately. But did he know the full story? Martin thinks not. If Harry had known from the beginning, he would have been prepared. You can see it in his body language. There's a protectiveness, but also confusion. Thomas Markle agrees. He says Harry deserves the truth. But here's the kicker. If Harry ever did find out, and chose to continue the lie, then he becomes something else entirely. Not just a victim, but a co-conspirator. And the consequences of that could shake the monarchy even further. Because as the Sussexes continue their public crusade, speaking about parenthood, equality, generational trauma, they're leaning hard into the image of young, modern royal parents. But if that image is based on a deception, it's not just Meghan's credibility on the line. It's Harry's. It's Archie's. It's Lilibet's. And here's the most twisted part. According to Martin, there was a brief window before the Oprah interview when the palace considered confronting Harry, laying out the suspicions, presenting the findings, giving him a chance to come clean. But they backed down. Why? Because by then, the Sussex war with the firm had already begun. There was no trust, no loyalty, no point. So they let it burn. And now, the world is left wondering. Did Harry know? Was he deceived? Or did he make a choice to believe a version of reality that protected the woman he loved, even if it meant burying the truth? As Thomas said in one of his final interviews, "I don't hate Harry. I pity him. Because one day, the truth is going to come out, and he's either going to feel betrayed or exposed." But before that happens, there's another member of the royal family who wasn't fooled. A woman known for cutting through nonsense, for seeing people exactly as they are. And she confronted Meghan directly, not with rage, not with gossip, but with one brutally simple question. And it stopped Meghan cold. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She didn't even raise her voice. Because princess and didn't need to. All she did was ask one question. One cold, calculated, perfectly timed question, and it shattered the tension in the room like glass under pressure. And Meghan Markle, according to multiple palace sources, didn't have an answer. This is the moment no one talks about. Buried behind layers of palace protocol, whispered about in corridors, shielded by aides who thought silence would protect everyone. But now, it's resurfacing. Because if Thomas Markle's claims are true, if Meghan underwent a hysterectomy at 19 and built her royal motherhood narrative around a carefully kept secret, then someone in the royal family had to notice. And that someone was Princess Anne. Let's rewind to the late spring of 2018. Just weeks before the royal wedding, the palace was a frenzy of preparation. Dresses being fitted, seating plans being revised, tabloid reporters swarming the gates. Every flower, every fork, every invitation scrutinized. But beneath the surface, behind the castle walls, there was unease. Staff had already begun expressing concerns about Meghan's temperament. Some referred to her as demanding. Others used words like calculated. But it wasn't just her approach to staff that raised eyebrows. It was how quickly, how easily, she slipped into the royal narrative. And that made him nervous. Because no one slips into this family easily. Especially not someone with Meghan's background. Divorced. American. Actress. Outsider. Princess and, the Queen's only daughter, had always been the monarchy's blunt instrument. She didn't do fanfare. She didn't do pity.